Have you ever spent hours breaking your back pulling weeds out of your spring garden, only to see them return thicker and stronger just a few days later? What if I told you that everything you know about weeds is completely backward? Weeds are not your enemies. In fact, they are desperately trying to tell you a secret about your soil, and you have been ignoring them. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving deep into the fascinating world of bioindicator plants. We are going to uncover the hidden warnings that weeds are flashing at you this spring. I promise you, by the end of this video, you will never look at a dandelion or a patch of clover the same way again. You might even find yourself thanking them. So, are you ready to stop fighting nature and start listening to it? Let us know in the comments right now, what is the one weed you absolutely hate dealing with every spring? Go ahead, drop a comment, and let us get started. Before we get into the specific weeds and what they are screaming at you, we need to understand a little bit of history. Long before modern agriculture, before chemical soil testing kits, and before synthetic fertilizers, farmers had to rely on their eyes. Ancient farmers and indigenous cultures across the world mastered the art of reading the land. They understood a fundamental rule of nature. Nature absolutely hates bare soil. When the earth is disturbed, damaged, or deficient in certain nutrients, nature acts like a doctor applying a very specific bandage. That bandage is what we call a weed. These plants are the first responders of the botanical world. They are genetically perfectly adapted to thrive in poor conditions. They move in to fix the soil, balance the pH, or break up hard dirt. Understanding this historical context changes our perspective entirely. We are moving away from a mindset of warfare against our lawns and returning to a mindset of observation and healing. Let us dive right into the first major concept you need to grasp this spring. We are talking about the idea of bioindicators. A bioindicator is simply a living organism that gives us an idea of the health of an ecosystem. When your garden soil is sick, when it lacks a specific nutrient, or when it literally cannot breathe because it is too tightly packed, it sends up a specific type of weed to do a specific job. These weeds have evolved over millions of years to survive in exact conditions that your precious tomatoes or delicate lawn grasses would absolutely hate. If you see a sudden massive explosion of one particular weed, it is not just random bad luck. It is a highly specific, targeted response from the earth itself. The soil is essentially putting up a giant billboard with a message written in green leaves. The problem is, most of us have never been taught how to read the language of this billboard. Instead of reading the message, we just spray it with chemicals or pull it out, completely ignoring the root cause. Now, let us talk about the absolute king of spring weeds. Yes, I am talking about the bright yellow, impossible-to-kill dandelion. Everyone seems to hate them, but when dandelions completely take over your yard, your soil is flashing a massive red warning light. Dandelions are a primary indicator of severely compacted soil. They also tell you that your soil is very low in available calcium, but surprisingly high in potassium. Think of a lawn where kids play constantly, or where heavy mowers drive the same path every single week. The dirt gets squished down so hard that normal grass roots simply suffocate and die. But the dandelion does not care. It thrives in this tight, breathless environment. It is nature's way of stepping in when the soil structure has completely collapsed. So the next time you see a field of yellow, do not just sigh in frustration. Recognize that your yard is crying out for some serious structural relief. But what is the dandelion actually doing to fix this problem? This is where we need to bust a massive gardening myth. You do not need to poison dandelions to save your lawn. If you have ever tried to pull one, you know they have a massive, thick taproot that goes incredibly deep into the earth. That root is not just there to annoy you, it is a biological drill bit. The dandelion uses that powerful root to physically break up the hard, compacted clay. Furthermore, that deep root reaches far below the surface to mine calcium and other minerals that have washed away from the topsoil. It pulls those minerals up into its leaves. When the dandelion eventually dies and decomposes, it leaves those essential nutrients right on the surface for other plants to use. To fix a dandelion problem, you urgently need to aerate your soil and add a good source of organic calcium. If you fix the soil compaction, the dandelions will naturally pack their bags and leave. Moving on to our next green messenger, let us look at broadleaf plantain. I am not talking about the banana-like fruit, but the low-growing weed with flat, oval leaves that look a bit like green tongues pressing against the dirt. If your spring garden is covered in plantain, your soil is sending a very clear, desperate warning. Plantain almost always indicates soil that is incredibly heavy, usually clay-based, and extremely compacted. In fact, it is often called the footprint weed because it thrives right exactly where people walk the most. It tells you that your soil has zero aeration and terrible drainage. It usually means the soil is waterlogged in the spring and bakes into a rock-hard crust in the summer. Your grass cannot survive there because its delicate roots simply get crushed. The plantain, however, lays flat to survive the foot traffic and uses its tough, stringy roots to hold the damaged earth together. So, how do we answer the warning call of the broadleaf plantain? Just like with dandelions, pulling them out does absolutely nothing to solve the underlying disease of the soil. Picture this as an illustration. Imagine trying to breathe while someone is sitting heavily on your chest. That is exactly how your soil feels right now. To fix the issue highlighted by plantains, you urgently need to relieve that immense pressure. Mechanical core aeration is your best friend here. You need to pull physical plugs of dirt out of the ground to let oxygen back in. After aerating, you must immediately sweep rich, fluffy compost into those holes. The compost will keep the holes open, invite beneficial earthworms, and slowly change the texture of the heavy clay. Once the soil becomes light and breathable again, the plantain will realize its job is done, and it will naturally fade away from your yard. Let us shift our focus to a weed that many people actually used to love, but now spend millions of dollars trying to destroy. I am talking about white clover. If your spring lawn is suddenly covered in little white flowers and three-leaf clovers, your soil is screaming one very specific word at you: nitrogen. Clover is a major bioindicator that your soil is completely exhausted and completely depleted of nitrogen. Nitrogen is the absolute most important nutrient for growing green, leafy grass. When your lawn uses up all the available nitrogen, the grass begins to starve, turn yellow, and thin out. Nature sees this starvation and immediately sends in the rescue squad. That rescue squad is clover. Clover does not need nitrogen in the soil to survive, which makes it the perfect plant to take over a hungry, depleted lawn. It is a glaring warning sign that your current fertilizing routine is just not working. Here is an amazing secret about clover, and a massive myth we need to bust right now. Pulling or spraying clover is a terrible mistake. Why? Because clover is actually a magical little factory. It has a special relationship with bacteria in its roots that allows it to literally pull pure nitrogen out of the air we breathe and inject it directly into the soil. It is free, natural fertilizer. Back in the 1950s, lawn chemical companies convinced the world that clover was a weed simply because their new weed killers could not kill dandelions without also killing clover. So they rebranded clover as a pest. Before that, clover was intentionally mixed into every single box of grass seeds sold. If you have clover, do not kill it. Let it do its job to fix your nitrogen problem. Or, if you really want just grass, you urgently need to top-dress your lawn with an organic nitrogen fertilizer, like blood meal or rich compost. Now let us talk about a weed that strikes fear into the heart of every homeowner. Crabgrass. It is ugly. It spreads like crazy and it chokes out everything in its path. But what is crabgrass actually warning you about this spring? Crabgrass is the ultimate indicator of soil exhaustion and very low calcium. But more importantly, it warns you that your soil surface has become a dry, crusty, uninviting desert. Crabgrass seeds need a lot of sunlight to hit the bare dirt in order to germinate. If you have crabgrass, it means your lawn is too thin and you are likely mowing your grass way too short. It also indicates that your soil structure is poor, often heavy and lacking organic matter. Crabgrass thrives where the top layer of dirt is baked hard by the sun. It grows low and wide, spreading its tough leaves to shade the bare, damaged earth that your regular grass abandoned. Fixing a crabgrass problem requires a total change in your spring strategy. Simply spraying it with toxic chemicals is a temporary band-aid that ignores the warning signs. To permanently banish crabgrass, you have to fix the environment it loves. First, raise your mower blade. You should be cutting your grass at a height of 3 to 4 inches. Tall grass casts deep shadows on the soil, and crabgrass seeds cannot sprout in the dark. Second, you urgently need to improve the soil texture. Add a layer of fine compost over your lawn this spring. This adds organic matter, breaks up the hard crust, and provides the calcium your soil is begging for. Finally, overseed your lawn heavily. You need to crowd out the crabgrass by planting good grass so thickly that the weed seeds simply have no room to grow. You have to outsmart it, not just poison it. Let us move away from the bright, sunny spots of your yard and look at those dark, damp corners. Have you noticed thick green moss creeping over your soil or creeping through your grass? While moss is not technically a weed in the traditional sense, it is one of the most powerful bioindicators in nature. If you have moss, your soil is giving you a combination warning. First, it tells you that the soil is highly acidic, meaning the pH level is very low. Second, it screams that the soil is constantly wet, waterlogged, and poorly drained. And third, it indicates a severe lack of sunlight and a lack of soil fertility. Moss has no true roots. It can only survive where moisture sits on the surface for long periods of time. Normal plants would drown and rot in these conditions, but moss happily unrolls its green carpet to cover the suffocating earth. How do we answer the warning of the moss? Scraping it away with a rake is useless because it will grow back in a matter of days. You have to change the environment. To fix the acidity, you urgently need to apply agricultural lime to your soil this spring. Lime will slowly raise the pH, making the soil sweet instead of sour. Next, you have to solve the drainage issue. This might mean aerating the soil to let water sink in, or digging a small French drain to redirect standing water. Finally, you need to prune back overhanging tree branches to let the glorious sunshine hit the ground. Grass and vegetables need sunlight to dry out the morning dew and power their growth. By fixing the pH, the drainage, and the sunlight, you create an environment where moss simply cannot survive. You fix the root cause, and the symptom disappears entirely. Next on our list is a weed that demands your attention because it physically hurts to touch it. I am talking about thistles. With their sharp, spiky leaves and deep, impossible roots, thistles are a nightmare to deal with. But what are they trying to tell you? Thistles are a massive red flag warning you about anaerobic soil. Anaerobic means without oxygen. When soil is heavily compacted, constantly wet, or totally lacking in healthy bacterial life, oxygen cannot penetrate the dirt. The soil literally dies. Beneficial microbes suffocate and nasty, sour-smelling bacteria take over. Thistles are one of the very few plants tough enough to survive in this dead, breathless zone. They also indicate a severe deficiency in calcium and an overabundance of potassium. Your soil is completely out of balance and gasping for a breath of fresh air. Let us take a closer look at the thistle to understand its amazing, yet annoying survival strategy. The thistle grows a massive, incredibly thick taproot that can plunge several feet deep into the hardest clay. This root acts like a giant wedge, physically shattering the underground hardpan to let air and water flow downward. Have you ever tried to pull a thistle, only to have the top snap off while the root stays firmly in the ground? That is exactly what it wants you to do. The root will just grow a new plant next week. To truly fix the warning of the thistle, you must introduce oxygen deep into the earth. You urgently need to use a broad fork or a core aerator to open up the ground. Then, drench the area with actively aerated compost tea. This floods the dead soil with millions of healthy, oxygen-loving microbes. Once the soil breathes again, the thistles will stop germinating. Now, let us look at a weed that often forms a dense, tangled, bright green mat over your garden beds in the early spring. It is called common chickweed. Chickweed is actually a very interesting bioindicator because it delivers a mixed message. On one hand, chickweed loves highly fertile soil. If you have chickweed, congratulations! Your soil is probably rich in nutrients, especially nitrogen. However, there is a catch. Chickweed also desperately warns you about poor drainage and a soil surface that tends to crust over after heavy spring rains. It thrives in cool, damp, shaded environments where the soil stays wet for way too long. The tiny, shallow roots of chickweed are perfectly adapted to slurp up moisture from the very top layer of the earth before the sun can evaporate it away. Managing the warning signs of chickweed requires a delicate touch. First, a fun fact. Chickweed is actually totally edible and makes a surprisingly delicious addition to spring salads. But if you want it out of your garden, you have to address the surface moisture issue. Because chickweed indicates that your soil forms a hard crust, you urgently need to protect that surface. The absolute best fix is to apply a thick layer of organic mulch, like shredded leaves, straw, or wood chips, over your garden beds. Mulch prevents the rain from beating the soil into a hard crust. It regulates the moisture so it does not sit on top, and it blocks the sunlight that chickweed seeds need to sprout. By simply covering the bare earth properly, you honour the warning of the chickweed and solve the problem without breaking a sweat. Let us move on to a weed that sounds slightly sinister. Red sorrel, sometimes called sheep sorrel. It is a small plant with arrow-shaped leaves and tiny reddish flowers. If red sorrel is invading your yard or garden, your soil is sounding a very specific, high-pitched alarm. Your soil pH is crashing. Red sorrel is the ultimate bioindicator for highly acidic sour soil. Furthermore, it tells you that the soil is very low in nitrogen and incredibly low in calcium. It thrives in dry, sandy, depleted soils where virtually nothing else can manage to grow. When you see a patch of red sorrel, you do not even need to buy a pH testing kit. The plant is telling you everything you need to know. Your soil has become so acidic that essential nutrients are literally locked up and unavailable to your desired plants. How do we fix the extreme acidity indicated by red sorrel? You have to sweeten the earth. Imagine trying to drink a glass of pure, concentrated lemon juice. That is what your plants are experiencing. To neutralize that acid, you urgently need to apply a heavy dose of agricultural limestone or wood ashes to the affected area. When you spread that white dust over the soil, it reacts with the moisture to slowly raise the pH level back towards neutral. As the pH rises, locked-up nutrients are suddenly released back into the soil, making them available to your grass and vegetables again. In addition to lime, you need to add plenty of rich, aged compost to build up the organic matter and hold moisture in that dry, sandy dirt. Fix the acidity, and the red sorrel will vanish as quickly as it appeared. Next up is a weed that demands absolute respect: stinging nettles. If you have ever brushed against one, you know the painful burning rash it leaves behind. But despite its painful defense mechanism, the presence of stinging nettles is actually a reason to celebrate. Nettles are a powerful bioindicator of incredibly rich, highly fertile soil. They specifically tell you that your soil is bursting with massive amounts of nitrogen and organic matter. In fact, nettles often grow near old compost piles, animal enclosures, or areas where lots of organic waste has broken down over the years. They are nature's way of utilizing an overabundance of nutrients that might otherwise wash away and pollute nearby water sources. The paradox here is that a plant that causes so much physical pain is actually the sign of perfect garden soil. So, what do you do if you have stinging nettles? First, put on some heavy leather gloves. Second, realize that you do not really need to fix the soil here because the soil is already fantastic. However, you might want to manage the area if it is near a pathway. Instead of throwing the nettles away, you should harvest them. Stinging nettles make an incredibly potent, nitrogen-rich fertilizer tea for your other plants. You simply chop them up, soak them in a bucket of water for a few weeks, and use the liquid to feed your hungry tomatoes. By doing this, you are taking the excess nutrients that the nettle absorbed from the rich soil and moving them to areas of your garden that need a boost. You are using the weed as a tool, turning a painful nuisance into a powerful garden ally. Let us look at a climbing, choking nightmare of a weed. Field bindweed, often called wild morning glory. It has beautiful white or pink trumpet-shaped flowers, but it wraps around everything and strangles your other plants. Bindweed is a vicious indicator of deep, severe soil compaction and a heavy, crusty surface. It often thrives in heavy clay soils that have been repeatedly tilled or ploughed. Here is the warning it is giving you. Stop tilling your soil. When you run a rototiller over your garden year after year, you destroy the soil structure and create a hard layer beneath the surface called a plough pan. Bindweed roots can travel 20 feet deep to bypass this hard pan. Every time you chop up bindweed with a tiller, every single tiny piece of root grows into a brand new plant. You are literally multiplying your problem. To defeat bindweed, you must change your entire gardening philosophy. You have to transition to a no-till gardening method. You urgently need to stop chopping up the soil and start building it from the top down. Smother the bindweed by putting down thick layers of cardboard, and then cover that with 6 inches of heavy compost and mulch. This blocks the light entirely. Over time, the cardboard will decompose. The compost will invite earthworms to naturally aerate the soil, and the deep compaction will be resolved without ever turning a shovel. It takes patience, but by listening to the warning of a bindweed and stopping the destructive practice of tilling, you will eventually create a loose, friable soil where the bindweed no longer feels the need to aggressively take over. Finally, let us talk about prostrate spurge. This is that flat red and green weed that grows in tight circles hugging the ground, often creeping out of the cracks in your driveway or taking over the absolute hottest, driest parts of your lawn. If you break the stem, a milky white sap oozes out. Spurge is screaming a warning about extreme heat, severe drought, and terrible compaction. It tells you that the biological life in your soil has been baked to death by the sun. Furthermore, spurge is a strong indicator that you might have a problem with root knot nematodes, which are microscopic worms that destroy plant roots. Spurge is one of the only plants that can tolerate the heat, the hard dirt, and the nematode attacks all at once. It is a plant of last resort. To fix the terrible conditions indicated by spurge, you must focus entirely on cooling the soil and restoring its biological life. You cannot leave the soil exposed to the blazing sun. You urgently need to introduce organic matter to retain water. Top dressing with a thick layer of compost is crucial here. You also need to adjust your watering schedule. Instead of frequent shallow watering, you need to water deeply and infrequently to encourage deeper grass roots that can survive the heat. To fight the nematodes organically, you can plant marigolds nearby, as their roots secrete a substance that naturally repels the harmful worms. By protecting the soil surface and restoring moisture, you take away the brutal environment that the prostrate spurge relies on to survive. As we wrap up our journey through the hidden language of weeds, it is crucial to remember one final, vital concept. You must look at the whole picture. One single dandelion does not mean your entire lawn is compacted. A single clover does not mean your soil is completely dead. You need to look for patterns and communities of weeds. If you see plantain, dandelions, and bindweed all growing happily together in the same area, that is a massive, undeniable confirmation that you have a severe compaction problem. Reading weeds is about observing the dominant plants that are taking over an area. By changing our paradigm from chemical warfare to holistic observation, we transform ourselves from frustrated lawn caretakers into true stewards of the earth. We stop fighting the symptoms and start healing the disease. And there you have it. The incredible, mind-bending truth is that the weeds you have been fighting all these years are actually nature's tiny, green doctors. They have been diagnosing your soil's illnesses and writing you a prescription all along. From the deep drilling taproot of the dandelion fighting compaction to the nitrogen-fixing magic of the clover, every plant has a purpose. The real plot twist here is that by trying to poison and eradicate these weeds, we have actually been killing the very things trying to heal our land. We have been shooting the messenger. Moving forward this spring, I want you to walk outside, look at your yard, and read the signs. Fix the compaction, balance the pH, add organic matter, and watch as your weed problems naturally disappear because their job is finally done. Thank you so much for watching. If this video completely changed how you look at your garden, please hit that subscribe button, give us a big thumbs up, and share this with a fellow gardener who is struggling with weeds. Now, I have a question for you to answer in the comments below. Based on what you learned today, what is your soil trying to warn you about right now? Let us get a conversation going down there, and I will see you in the next video.